Alright, so we're back now and we're going to be working now with ink on toned paper. Okay, so let's talk about the materials I'm going to be using. Now I've got an ink pen, a fountain pen here, and the ink. So this is a Falcon, Pilot Falcon pen, and they're fairly expensive, but you don't need anything highly expensive. You can use India ink in a pen, or you can use a Pitt pen. That's totally fine. The technique is the same, but I love fountain pens, and they make a nice, wonderful drawing tool. So I'm going to be using the Pilot pen here. And this is called the Justus. And then the ink I'm using is a Japanese ink here, and it's called Adzukiro number 6, and it's kind of a reddish, a dark maroon tone. So just keep that in mind. But you can use black, you could use a brown, you can use other inks as well. So I'll put that to the side. Then I'll be using for highlight, lighter dark form shadow, I'll be using white chalk, not the Prismacolor, but the white chalk. And for erasing, kneaded erasers, big white eraser, and then if I need any of the other mono erasers or the electric eraser, I'll be using that too as well. So let's get started. So I'll move these out of the way a little bit, and let's just talk about drawing on the toned paper. We've already done, if you've seen the other demos, you've seen this a little bit, but I'm just going to use the ink pen too as well, just to show you. I get in here, make sure we can see in our camera. So it sits on the surface really nicely. The toned paper I have is Canson toned paper, and it's called Light Blue. It is number 490 Light Blue, and the tone of the ink is a little bit redder, so it is kind of maroonish in value. So we have a mid-tone value, our darkest value, our mid-tone value here. Right, and then our lightest value, of course, will be with the chalk, and then we can get pretty light with that, pretty quick. And that's about as light as you can get it right in through there. Kind of when all the paper disappears, you get that lightest value. Now, in terms of mark making, we have a little bit different mark making strategy. I prefer mostly hatching, and that is stroking direction at different various intervals when you draw. And sometimes cross-hatching. So if we have hatching that is in one direction, when we mean cross-hatching, and I'll just put an X for cross. So cross-hatching. Then we mean going opposite or at angles to that hatching mark to build up a darker value. Or you can add hatching to what you have already here in the same direction, which I like to do sometimes too as well. Or sometimes I'll do a minor cross hatch. Now I can continue to hatch here and come across, and the more layers I get, obviously the darker it gets to render value. So you're going to find and explore edge control, as well as obviously form drawing, different attitudes or different ways of getting value and contrast. Let me get that down a little bit, right? But also trying to get more gradated, softer edges when you use hatching and or cross hatching. So the longer we go, the darker the value gets where we hatch the most. You can see that starting to get, it's still not as dark as here where it's all complete in through there. I could probably make one more pass and then it would start to just get oozy dark in there. So we can start to build up value in terms of layers, right, of cross hatching and or hatching, either one. And then when we're using the white charcoal, generally just kind of how you've seen it done before, just kind of softly kind of gradate. And again, I still keep the lightest values or the light form value out of the paper tone, which is still about a 4 or 5 in the value scale. So I don't mix the two values. So if I hatched over a little bit, you can start to get that feeling crudely. Now another thing too, students have a little problems with sometimes is getting those values right in through this area. So about a little bit darker than our mid-tone value in here. So one tried and true technique is the more you leave space in between those hatch marks, you allow more of that mid-tone value to show through. So we have a lighter value here, and if we add just another layer of just same hatch marks with a little bit closer together, that gets a little bit darker. And the same thing can happen if we move a little bit further over, gets a little bit darker, right? And gets a little bit darker. And you continue to layer and get lines closer and closer together. And then of course if you wanted to crosshatch, you could crosshatch over here. So I use mostly hatching, but sometimes I use crosshatching. I use a little bit of both, but I would say most of the time I use hatching. Well, let's just see how it works out. I think that will also tell the story, but mostly in my sketchbook. Some of you guys have seen those in the past, and some of the older lectures before we really got the drawing database going. You can find them in I think the figure section a long 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, actually, before we got the nice camera and stuff. I actually made those with a GoPro camera. Those are really way too hard to make. This is so much easier and better now. But the point is, in my conversation, you can see me using mostly hatching. So this particular technique, I'm going to go ahead and pop up the image that we'll be working with. We're in the basics, so we're working with the still life here. And I'm at 7 inches here, I believe, by 10. Let me double check and measure. So if you want to get your drawing close to mine, you can. It is 7 by, in fact, 10 inches. So my picture plane is a little bit longer than the image that I have popped up. That's okay. We can leave a little bit more space out in through here. So this will be a little bit looser it's also a looser technique, which I like. I personally like looser technique. Now, one other thing, you can use graphite pencil to do your under drawing lay-in. I am not. I want to show you that light drawn lines and even an ink can be okay to show through when you want it, and also they have a tendency to disappear later on when you add and bring up your value range. So if you're a little scared or concerned about it, if you have a heavy touch and you want to start out with a pencil, graphite pencil, please do so. Use a very light one, like about a 2H or 4H. Keep very light touch, and I think you'll be fine. Okay. Okay, so the first thing we'll tackle here, and one thing also about my pen, I'll say, and then I won't say much more about it probably, is the nib is a medium nib. It's not a very fine point nib, which I have. I have others that are even tinier, but this is about a medium point. So this is a nice size. I could go bigger with it if I want. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's start out. Let's kind of lay in the table. It is generally about halfway across in this composition through here, and so I'll lay that in nice and lightly. You hear me kind of scrape over. And if you want to still use a ruler, you can later on when you're getting those tight angles. Even with a fountain pen, like I'll come back over here, and you can get pretty sharp lines. Just be careful if you get a lot of ink out there. You might smudge that line a little bit. I don't mind a little smudging. Also, this paper is particularly absorbent of ink and sucks in like a sponge, and it sucks in that ink fairly quickly. If you're using like Bristol board or Bristol paper, something that's got no tooth to it, this has got a tooth to it, the smoother side too, which is what I'm using. that ink might sit on that surface for a long, long time. If you draw across it and it won't dry, and if you slide something over, it may ink over. So the surface you use really does matter. Okay, so I've got my kind of my table line laid in, and I'm going to push these objects. Notice that my picture plane is a little bit different. I think that's okay. I'm going to push over everything. So I'm going to start the cube a little bit further over in the composition, and it's because of the parallax of the camera. It isn't slightly 3-point and tilted. I think this time I'm going to leave it and keep it just slightly tilted, and I've got this straight edge to angle it from to help me out a little bit. So we're going to pull this in a little bit. So just developing a really light touch with my cube in through here, coming down. barely touching down. So I'm just going to come across here. And so I'm going to keep that angle. Notice if it was a true 2-point, it would stand straight up. So our head is slightly tilted down looking at the object. So I'll come down a little bit, maybe about right. Just a slight lean, not a whole lot. Nothing truly too distorted. In through here, so I'll bring this down a little bit further. And this will come in, angled the opposite way, just a slight bit. We're maybe tilted down 15 degrees, maybe. Just slightly right in through here. And then, of course, over and through there. So it's looking pretty good. Then I'll tighten this up a little bit. Then, of course, if I wanted to come along with my ruler or my hard edge and say, hey, I want to get this a nice tight line, I just take it and use it in the same way. Just push down, boom. And like I said, the ink is the paper is pretty absorbent pretty quickly. And it takes it off nice and quick. So we're working on our lay-in, our ink lay-in. I might be a little long here, between here, but I think I'm okay. No big deal. And I'll start now, we'll lay in the sphere. So the sphere sits a little bit in on the box in through here. So a nice clean circle. This is where you might get in trouble if you're a little bit more inexperienced. You want to use graphite, and it's totally fine. Graphite's great because you can erase it. You can erase it out. But I don't mind making mistakes with ink pencil. No big deal. As long as they're not too dark, they don't get in the way too much. We got that. We'll go ahead and get this cast shadow down here, starting to emerge and lay in over here as well. And also on the sphere, so we'll lay that in there. Hits that edge a little bit, doesn't it, running through there. And this is all going to be form shadow later and through here, and then we'll come out with our cast shadow here, on a straight, and then we'll catch that cone in a moment. All right, so let's tackle that cylinder. So the cylinder is a little higher here, highest thing in our composition. So I'll put it starting here. It bisects about halfway, maybe just slightly over to the right on the sphere. Then I've got that ellipse. Sometimes what you can do, I'll show you a little technique when you're drawing cylinder. I'm just going to put a straight line across and get the width of it. So from end to end over here, then about this distance coming down. This is horizontal, kind of vertical alignment I'm using. No matter what image I'm drawing from, whether it's photographic or three-dimensional live objects, kind of the same. It's all the same now, but when I was a student, it's good to get in front of the real things for sure. So that straight line could be here. It's just a good helper for my ellipse, because this distance here and here out, this curve out here will be repeated down and through here. Here's the true center right in through there to get my ellipse working pretty nicely right in through there to gauge that on. Okay, then I can bring my vertical down, sketch that out nice and tight in through here. So Pilot pens, I don't have any financial stake in any of these companies, the Japanese ink or the Falcon Justus that I'm using. It's pretty expensive, but you can get a good Pilot pen or a good fountain pen. Maybe it's your local pen type store. Kind of look around for it online for about $15 or $16. This one was considerably more expensive, and I don't expect anybody to invest in that kind of material unless you're really in it for the long haul. Okay, so the form shadow on the sphere, excuse me, oh yeah, on the sphere and the cylinder too, coming down about right in through here, okay, and over, and then we'll grab this cast shadow for now. It starts hitting in this direction, and we'll wind up hitting the back ellipse over here and on over, something like that. This will come on over. Let me grab the sphere. I'm going to put a little highlight on here later, and it's going to be right about here. Just kind of mark it. And then the form shadow on the sphere will be about, and it is right in through here. Because as soon as we draw these in, get these laid in, then we're going to block them in, mop them in really quickly. So this cast shadow coming from the other side of the cube over. You know, tell yourself what side, where is the light source? Light source coming from the left, slightly above, coming down onto the objects. Cast shadow here coming over a little bit, and then we'll start to lay in that cone. So the cone top is about, right, slightly lower than the cylinder, certainly, and lower than the highest point or the highest curve of the ellipse. About, thinking about right in through there. Let's see how that works out. We can always adjust if we need. Angled coming down, about a 30-degree angle of the cone. About right in through here. Feels pretty close. This might be too angled for the cube. Take that out just a little. Maybe just a little bit. And we've got the curve. Now I could throw a straight line across too to help me out. It's kind of a straight, kind of a triangle, if you will. And I could come across here and through here. So again, compositionally, I push these over. It looks like I also increased their size a little bit. So I wanted to take a little bit of compositional change, which you can do. So let's work on now the ellipse, the bottom part of the ellipse coming through here and on over and curve through, curving, and of course it would come on the other side about right through there. We see through the image. That feels pretty good. I'm going to tighten up the points to the tip here, and also on the side over here. There we go. That's it. So we're working pretty well through here. Now, what's interesting, a couple things that are going on. Don't worry about that line through there. I don't mind that line, little sketchy lines through there. When we add some lighter value, it'll take part of it off. Let it be a sketch. Show your line work. We're not drawing photographically. Photographic realism is fine, but there's a lot of other things going on in drawing besides looking like an exact photograph. Okay, so we come up here, and we're going to catch this cast shadow on the back. It's a nice fan shape all over and through here. This would line up and catch it maybe a little bit further over. We'll catch that since that catches it together in through here. And then the cast shadow on the cone moving about the same angle now as the cube. And moving about like that. We'll come back, and then this one kind of a longer way to go, so it's going to be a little flatter, and out, of course, off the picture like so. So form shadow now on the cone, coming down and over through that and through here, and it kind of curved over just a touch. Looks nice. And then we have a cast shadow now on the cube form. So I need to angle. This goes a little bit longer, and then comes out to about right there. So where it touches, notice it gets a little bit darker too. You have two shadows coming together. And you have the sphere shadow too as well. So we get two cast shadows for the price of one. How about that on the cone? So we get this curve on a curve. It stays pretty curved. So for the cast shadow shape now on the curved cylinder, it keeps it pretty curved, doesn't it? Now, if we didn't have the box, it would probably end about right through there. So it comes over, and then it gets overlapped by the box cast shadow about right here, and this starts to go up. And notice how it gets a little bit darker. You're getting layers of cast shadow upon. You have two layers of cast shadow on the light surface of the cone, and so where they overlap the most gets a little bit darker. Pretty fascinating, and you get a little reflected light through here, even in the cast shadow. So you really have to know your stuff to start to control that. What if you were trying to draw this out of your head and you wanted something like that? Well, the more you study from observation, here we're using images. That's the best way to get the same vision. But do your own. When you learn these techniques and you watch the videos some, great. Rewatch them if you need to. But the real important thing is to get yourself in front of your own still life setups and make your own still lives. I think I should do a video on setting up still lives. That might be worth our while too for students that are outside of my university here in YouTube, what I call YouTube land. So stay tuned for that one. That shouldn't be too bad of a. Should be pretty easy to do that a whole lot. Okay, so now I think we're ready for the mop in or the block in of the values. Now remember, we're going to do a 1, 2, 1, 2 step drawing. It means light, dark, light, dark. So this is one. I called the light 1 here, and I call the dark 2. And so we're going to help illuminate the light by putting in and laying in step 2 in the shadows of our drawing. Background, form shadows, and cast shadows. We're going to group them all together. All right, let's do that now. Okay, so we're blocking in. So I'm going to start blocking in now. I'm going to start with the background and kind of really just move myself from left to right. And of course, I might have to change the orientation of the paper some. But I'll try to show you the same orientation that I have always, just like before. Okay, and the reason I'm moving left to right, a couple things. Drawing ink, and I've got my hand here. If I was doing it here and over, I might rub my hand in. But like I said, this dries pretty quick, the ink on the paper, so that's a good thing. It's very absorbent. So I'm going to start out, and you can vary a lot. I see, or you can slow it down, have a lot of control with this. I've seen some really cool drawings where it looks like an engraving. If you've never seen engravings before, that was an older 16th, I believe, maybe 17th that started, maybe even later, century technique, where engravers trained on their own. They're in themselves, they were kind of artists. And they would take paintings or drawings from an artist, and then they would reproduce them on a metal plate, engrave on them. And the technique can be sort of kind of duplicated in other print media and also in drawing, but it's really slow process, and they're gorgeous engravings. One of my favorite artists, illustrators that did Dante's trilogy, The Divine Comedy, is Gustave Doré, and he did his work, and then he had an engraver engrave the works, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. So take a look at that. When you look at money, any kind of money with engraving, like the old American dollars were engraved. All right, so blocking in. Notice I have an angle to my line. I would caution you from going straight vertical sometimes with your line work. It has a way to flatten out your image. So we're just blocking in now. And I'm keeping a very light touch, and then I keep a certain distance from the lines from each other. You kind of have to do that to get a value tone that's not too dark. Now I'm going to come in through here, and you've got that cast shadow, but I'm just going to mop over this all in once. Go ahead and catch this cast shadow too back here a little bit. And through there. It's going to have an ink look to it. Ink looks different than other materials. It's wet drawing material or wet drawing media. So I'll go catch it here. And then I'm going to catch this edge a little bit of my cone to here, just to kind of crispen that a little bit, because I'm going to catch this form shadow coming across just a little bit, slightly different angle, right into here, form shadow, and through there, and then finish it off into here. And I like working in pen and ink quite a bit. It's very fresh, very loose, especially for quicker, looser, quick sketches. Try to make a couple of drawings in my sketchbook every day, my sketchbooks that I keep every day, just to continue to keep in touch with traditional craft. Because if you work non-traditionally like I do with my fine art work, where I exhibit across the country, you might lose that connection, because since I have to teach more traditional techniques at times, or mostly all the time, you want to keep that connection. It keeps you in tune to your historical background, antecedents, and who came before you, and all that good stuff. All right, so lopping in, mopping in, blocking in these cast shadows on the cone themselves. Got the back here. Let me block in now the cylinder here. I'm kind of working the opposite way, just like I said I wasn't, but that's okay. It dries pretty quick, so. All right, so we'll work the cylinder here, nice and light, nice and loose. I keep a very light touch on the ink through here. Gonna tighten this line up right in through here. There we go. Okay. And we'll catch the form shadow on the sphere in through here. Kind of get that cylinder, sphere a little bit back in place here, and I'll start to catch it. It's around here later on. Nice rounded quality there, and later on get lighter into there. And then I'll cast shadow under here, like so. And form shadow on the cube itself. I'll kind of come in a diagonal kind of way in through here. And then out to the cast shadow. Let's see, I gotta finish the line. Forgot the line here. Right in through there, and then kind of over. Okay. Alright, so got a good block in going in through here. So now I've laid in the composition, light side and shadow side. So I've got now a 1-2 step drawing going on. Things are all blocked in, and so we can get more comfortable now and kind of dig in and start to go a little bit darker. So the first thing I'll do is I'll start to come in here and start to render now coarse shadow with the sphere in through here. So we'll start up in through here, start to hit this coarse shadow, and it's darkest and thickest in this ringed area. So I'm kind of overlapping my lines, so keeping it more hatched than anything else. And through here, then I could come across kind of a cross contouring, kind of a cross hatch, emphasizing the curve of the ball a little bit. We'll come out a little bit further and through here, underneath. I'm going to start to catch the background. So I want more contrast against that ball. Every time I need to catch its edge, I'll kind of come across with a pen a little bit through here. A little darker. We're going to keep more variation on this background than what it has. It's pretty flat. You want more line value variation in your drawings. Through here. And I might get a little bit slight crosshatch going. Go right through there, catch that edge. Catch this edge a little bit. Working through here. Then I think I'll turn my image. So I've got some newsprint paper underneath the drawing to give it a little bit of padding. I always have that. Always good to remind everyone of that. And so I'll bring this over through here. Make sure we can see it on camera. Yeah, we can. There we go. Nice and pretty clear there. Now I can start to render a little bit further across that ball a little bit. That helps me get a cleaner, better angle for me to be more in control. Certainly do this on your own if you need to. So this is working pretty well. Get a little darker here in this cast shadow. And we're going to fade that off a little bit and make it a little bit lighter. Darkest right in through underneath in through here, so it's pretty close to to what I want. I could kind of crosshatch just a little bit and through there. It's working pretty well, starting to sit down. And we'll start coming back up in through here now to kind of play off the ball's turn this way. And I could start to kind of crosshatch over to get off the turn here. It comes through and up and through and around. It kind of gives that sort of circular feel to it. And then I might soften up that reflected line by putting a few more lines that get closer together. And I'll come back through another pass, the foreshadow through here. This foreshadow moves in through here a little bit and it gets more reflected light underneath here. So just following that form. So it's pretty dark in there. It's 7s, 8s, 9s, maybe not absolute dark, but I'm getting close to what I want. And that's about as far as I'm going to go for now. Later on I can adjust. I might have to make one more pass at it later. One thing, as I'm kind of continuing to go here, is the ink that I'm using is not water soluble. That means that what is water soluble? Sorry, that if I get this wet, it will start to run away. Sometimes India ink is not, and that's an advantage. So when you put it down, it won't. You can do washes of that. Here, if I put a wash on this, this would start to bleed out a little bit. They're good for these fountain pens, but that's the rub on that, meaning that they don't take ink that can dry and clog up because of the materials in it, the particles in it. So they have to be very, very water soluble for fountain pen. Just keep that in mind. All right, so keep going now with the sphere here. I'm going to continue to turn this. Continue to turn it through. Of course, the highlight will be right in through here. So I'm going to put some on the back side coming through. And I'm keeping very light line, loose line. And keeping it a little bit further apart than I have in other areas. And we'll come across here a little bit more value. So we've got this reflected light over here to deal with. And we'll come through hatching and cross hatching. A lot of hatching and then some cross hatching. The more cross hatching you do, it kind of looks like weaving in a way, which is okay. Some people like that look. I'm not as big a fan of it, but it's just an aesthetic taste kind of thing. All right, so we've got that. So probably one pass dark over here where the core shadow ends on that over here on the edge. Where there's just about no reflected light, just a little bit, because it starts over and through here. And now continue on with darker and lighter form shadow. And remember number 2 and 3 on our 6 properties of light. Coming in through here. And you just try to go across that sphere and continue to make it round by getting a circumference kind of feel to it as it comes around in through here. All right. And then turns in through here. Now, the difficulty a little bit is you want to make sure you get some smooth edges. Form shadows right have smooth edges. Well, that's a little bit of a trick, right, with ink. So the way to do that, now I've got to smooth out this edge a little bit, smooth these out just a little bit. So this dark comes over to the edge. The core shadow comes on over to the edge, which happens sometimes in reality. Leonardo might have left that a complete reflected lighten through here, or Rubens, or maybe Caravaggio may not have. So we come over here a little bit. Now here's the trick. So, or not a trick, but the drawing technique is we continue to layer our line to give this smoothing. So see how I'll come in this middle section where there's a transition from the coarse shadow to the darker form shadow. Smooth edge, I've got to smooth this out. So I'm just layering line through. Layering line through, layering it through, and a little darker through here, so more lines. So this is more hatching, right? So I've got some cross hatching under there, but now I'm doing a lot of hatching, layering the same stroking line, and it's starting to fill in the space a little bit more, thus layers of ink, and it gets a little bit, or they're getting darker, and I'm layering it. And then when I don't layer as much, I leave more space in between, it starts to get a lighter middle value, which is what I want, because we're getting right up into this highlight, right up over and through here. And I'll lay some white chalk in this area on top of it, or under with nothing touching as well. So okay, so I'm moving over here, and I'm going to darken in this a little, coming up underneath here. There we go. And this will go a little darker. That's looking pretty good. So I've got this reflected light shadows coming in through there. Not bad. Okay, now I'm going to darken the background tone a little bit. I think I can keep the same hand angle. Works pretty well. And so we want variation. Now it becomes, you know, I can see what's going on with that sphere even more. And I can come across here and say, okay, with my background tone, I can get a little darker back here. How dark? I can be a little bit lighter if I want, compared to the image that we're working from. Always want to catch that edge, kind of reconstitute and get that edge back in through here. So just stroking on through, then I can kind of squiggle it a little bit and go a little faster. That's what I like to do. I have a little bit of a scribbly gestural quality sometimes. And you can do a little cross hatching over here if you want. Make it a little darker. I'm keeping my cross hatch lines pretty far, decently far apart, so they don't become too obvious. This technique is a little, be patient with yourself if you haven't used a lot of it. It's not, let's be honest, there's nothing in drawing that's easy. You earn it by a lot of mileage and just getting it. So I get some emails, how do I get better, you know, with this? And I get that from my students here at school all the time, and I tell them, you've got to put in the mileage. You got to just trust yourself. This is what you want to do, and put in that time, and it's not easy. And if for whatever reason, if you're putting in the time and you get bored by it, you're probably meant to be, you know, you're probably meant to use drawing as a minor tool and not a major tool. We have a lot of graphic designers at school here in the department, the School of Arts, and they use drawing. They draw pretty well. They draw really nicely, but most of them use it as a tool and not a fine art finish, or, you know, don't use painting as a fine art finish, but they have to study both at various beginning and intermediate levels, so that's fine too. So everybody has a slightly different plan of what they want for drawing. Now I'm going to come out here, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself for the whole drawing, but I want to kind of maybe slightly finish an area so you can see it. And so I'm going to hatch over, but look how far apart my lines are. It gives me a lighter value. It's okay. If they were close together, it might go too dark. It may not look as good. So aesthetics and drawing. So I'm going to hatch a little bit over in through here. So that's working pretty well. And I think I'm going to put a little bit of tone across this box a little bit. Slide it across. Kind of use this angle as the plane to put a little bit of line through here, like so. Make it just slightly perceptually, just a little bit darker into there. And on over. We've got that. Okay, so now I'm going to reorient it back to straight up. Give me a moment to do that. I'm going to push my image that I'm working from. I've got to change that, so bear with me for a moment in the way here. There we go. Okay, full. There we go. Okay, so let's see what we've wrought here. So it's working pretty well. So I am going to work a little bit longer, put a little bit of value down here. And after I take a drink of my Diet Pepsi, and put a little tone down here on the table, right in through here, so it's a little bit darker than the value of the paper. So I'm going to put this at a kind of an angle here, right in through here, keep it light and loose. And I get the lines fairly far apart, and that's probably enough. I'm going to kind of squiggle around a little bit, keep it loose, keep it a little bit more artistic in through here. Lay that in. And that's looking pretty good for now. So I'm going to throw a little bit of white chalk on here in a moment. I'm going to go one more pass of hatching on the background tone. Bring that over. I'm going to go just a little bit darker in through there. There we go. So we can see that. And let's add a little bit of that chalk to the drawing. Okay, so we've got our chalk tools. Just white, what they call white charcoal. Generals calls white charcoal, and that is just fancy word for saying chalk. So we've used this already. We've used it in drawings prior, so we're adding now this white chalk area. So we're, be cautious. Be very cautious when adding it. Adding it very slowly is probably the smartest game. So I'm going to think about the highlight's going to be right in through here, so I'm not going to go that light yet. So I'm going to add more light in through here, kind of round it out into this area. You don't need a whole lot. It's probably 85–90% ink in the paper and about 10 to 20% the white chalk, if even that much. So notice how I took my finger. I see I took it back a little bit. I'm not blending it, I'm erasing it. I'm like, I might be too light there. So I'm just taking it out a little bit rather than kind of blend it. So I want to be careful that way. Just to not get too light too quick. Very conscious of that. So right in through here, it's lightest. This area. It's a pretty hot reflected light, but it's not as bright as here. It's still darker than anything over here, so I'll probably just leave that. If anything, I'd go darker with my ink pen right in through there. Okay. So pretty close to where I want it. Maybe just a little bit lighter. I'm leaving a little bit of this paper along this edge to be a turning for me. I want that to turn a little bit and get a little bit darker. I'm going to take that down just a sec and then go back on it. Sometimes I may not like the texture and I take it out just a little bit. The second pass is better. And I'm going to take my ink pen and come back and tweak out this edge right in through here and make it a little bit stronger. So that comes out a little bit. It's feeling pretty good there. So now I can take and say, okay, I want a more sophisticated highlight. And I'm going to put it a little bit off where I had it before. I'm going to change that a little bit because I can. I'll lighten this up. I think it's a little bit more further about right in through here. So I'm going to go a little bit brighter, but I'm going to keep it soft transition. So remember, it's hitting at 45 degrees from the light source. Out here in front, hitting at 45 degrees down. That feels pretty good right in through there. I could make it a little bit longer if I wanted to. Then if you don't like it, you could tone it back with your finger a little bit. You could do that. I'm going to continue on. So it's not smudging, I'd be blending in. That's not what we're doing. We're not really smudging. And I'll lighten this up just a little bit further. And the more I go, the more glossy it would look. So I could change the feeling of the texture just a little bit. I'm going to go a little bit brighter right in through here. There we go. That feels pretty good. That looks pretty good on there. Here we go. Okay, so now we've got a good lighting situation on the ball. And we've got a medium dark background tone. And we're faded a little bit in through here. I'm okay with it. If you want to make yours darker, you could. That's totally fine. I'm just going to fade that a little bit to get a little value range movement. I think is important. If you look at the image, the background of the image completely, it's a little bit darker over here. It gets darker here and it stays middle value, then it gets a little bit lighter. That's because the light's hitting down and through here, through this area, so it gives a little bit of a halo, and then it starts to fade off. If we kept going off this image, if we looked at the photograph that we're working from the image, it would get darker and darker. But I like to play a little around with the value. You can take artistic license. I might come over here and say, I'll catch this line a little bit, but I won't keep it as sharp as here, and then I'll fade this or make this a little bit darker. And then I'll run it into the background tone of the table just a little bit more, start to soften the edge, and it is a little bit darker in through here. So it has a very kind of sketchy quality. This is a great technique to take with your sketchbook. If you have toned paper sketchbook, which you can buy, ink is very accessible on the road, as well as the chalk pencils. And you could also use, if you like the Prismacolor, you could use those as instead of or in lieu of the chalk pencil. I like the chalk a little bit better, but it is smudgy if you're not used to it. So this is going to be a little bit darker in through here. In that table later on down into here, I might mix these two together. It's going to be a little bit darker than the cube a little bit. Now the cube right in through here will be a little bit lighter, so we can put a little bit light on our cube in through here. And so I might go a little bit cross direction from the marks I've made. We can work on top of those a little bit if we want. They don't blend. They don't. You can work on top because they don't. They're not going to smudge in because that ink is already dry. So this gets a little bit lighter into here. Take that through. See, I could take that out. I just kind of erase that out. You can take your finger and do that if you want. So I might put a little line out here and see how I like it. And if I don't like it as much, I could just take my finger and just take a little bit off. It's more like an eraser than anything else. This might get just a little bit of a lighter area. I don't want this area to, it's close to this, but I don't want this to be lighter than my highlight. I want my highlight to be super number one. I want it to be right there. So run through here. There we go. All right, so we're getting now a little lighter here. I'll fade that through, and then I'll add some tone over here. It's a little bit lighter than the tone of the paper. So we can come through with the glossing really quickly in there. Then of course if I needed an edge later to a butt, I can do that. And through here, keep that edge tight, and we could come over. We're going to keep those corners a little darker. It means the center will be a little bit lighter. Just a little bit. And if you, later on when you draw bigger and you really want to stay loose, you can even crosshatch with your chalk pencil as well. So put a little pointing corner here where that light might come together through there. So a little tighter line in through there. This can go start to go even quicker. Tighten this line up in through here. There. Sometimes it's a little bit darker in the corner, and then that little lip edge gets a little bit lighter. It gives you that machined edge that's kind of important to block your objects, if you will. So we get a nice range going there, and then I might lighten, kind of modulate this a little bit. I always want to keep it smooth transition, but a little bit modulated and light. but with transitions. That's what I'm trying to say, sorry. Right in through there. So I like this coming across here, a little bit of a line down in through here where it lightened up. Not by a whole lot, let me run it through there. There we go. I think that's working pretty well. Okay. Keep that point tipped out just a touch. Right in through there. Remember, I kept this a 3-point cube, just barely, because we're getting a slight tilt on the verticals there. Okay, so we're working. I think that's working pretty well. Now I'm going to come over and start to refine now the lighting situation. So I'll look at, good, again, relationships like within an imaginary circle. Here's the cap to the lens of our camera. And I look within, I think about that circle. What are the relationships? How are they working? Pretty well. Seem to be working pretty solid so far. I'm going to come over here and catch this edge and then darken this down just one more little pass. And then would I tweak any of this? Maybe I would come across here, just one more pass on the coarse shadow, just gently. And catch that turn just one more time, just to go a little bit darker right in through there. And otherwise, I think that's a nice play off that. Okay, so moving on now, let me straighten this back up. And so we'll catch this shadow, cast shadow here of the corner of our box here. I'll kind of redraw that with a tighter edge. Keeps that nice and kind of fresh. Move this cast shadow over a little bit over in through here and catch this edge. Now, a lot of times when I draw cubic forms, I like to diagonal the plane out that's on the shadow side. Here's why, because I can abut one edge and I can kind of move my hand to the edge and it gives it that side shading. Or you could shade it back to the vanishing point that's assumed going out in these directions. So that works pretty well too. Straight up and down is fine, but it gets a little bit stiff. You want movement to your drawing. So I'm going to take another pass at our form shadow here. Take that in pretty quickly. And then we're getting, now coming down the bottom here, taking a look at that image. Through here, down through. Then I'll start to render this. It's got some interesting movement of light. It's kind of at a band. It's a little darker here. It's a slight banding or shape oriented. It's a little bit darker, then it fades a little bit. So it's a little bit darker here. Then it fades a little bit. See this wider, lighter area in through here? I can go a little bit darker. And then it gets this little dark reflection, which is interesting. You don't see that too terribly often. But it's reflected light. Actually, it's the wider band. I see what it is now. And then it gets darker about. I'm going to put a stronger line so you see it. Then I can soften it up about right here. That would be the natural cast shadow or form shadow if we didn't have a lot of reflection. Just keep that in mind. We'll tighten that up, tighten that up. So what happens is it can kind of come across here, go a little darker. I can start to slightly crosshatch in through there and then back through. And we start to get a pretty solid relationship going. I might go a little bit darker. Notice how I'm also pointing. I put a little, see I'm putting a little dark tip. See how that forces the corner? It forces it. Put a little dark. You don't want these big dots. Don't put big dots out there. You have to kind of have to get the feel for it. You have to have a natural feel for it. Or if it's not natural, then start to look and see. But I can kind of point that out. When I call point, I'm not actually pointing to it, but I'm actually touching the tapping down on the ink so to get a little bit darker through there. I'll go a little bit darker pass here. Right in through there. Alright, point that out a little bit and I'll take this down below. This will go a little bit darker in through here. One more pass. I think that'll be plenty. There we go. I think that works pretty well. I might catch, there's a lot of paper showing through here. A lot of it's getting that paper covered in enough variations to make that work in terms of the shadow. Now we've got the cast shadow to work with, so we'll get in there and start to work that. Notice again, there's no white value in this plane. Maybe I could go lighter here, but I kind of like the slightly darker top plane just a little bit than the lighter here. So I'm going to leave that. That might not be what you want for your drawing. You could go a little bit lighter if you desire. I'm going to put a little mark in through there. Okay, so cast shadow. I'm going to take this edge and really strengthen its integrity, edge integrity, especially running through here, really sharp and darker, and then later on it could fade just a little bit right through here as it turns over a little bit. Because this will have a little bit more value on it. I'm going to integrate a little bit of light, a little bit of dark together, just to keep the eye moving. I'm going to keep that eye moving in through there. Alright, looks like I'm running out of ink. Okay, so if you want to know about the Pilot pen ink and refilling it, recharging, I'll show you that. So this comes in a nice cartridge. So before I do this, this is a good teaching moment. Let me get a cover sheet and cover my drawing up, because this could get a little messy. Alright, so I'll cover that, and I'll take my ink bottle. And this is cartridge. You can do two things. You could just dip in there every time you need ink, or this has a cartridge. You could do a little bit of both. So I'll show you that. So let me set this out. Make sure you guys stay. I'll open this up. Got the ink out there. Just if you do have something like this, keep this away clearly from your drawing, so that if something accidental happens, you'll be okay. Now I'll dip this into the ink and start to, it's like an ink dropper, and start to suck it up and wait a little bit. Let the air get in the bubble, about 20 seconds, and get a little bit more and fill it up pretty good. Maybe one more time to fill, and that's plenty. And so I'll let that kind of set in through there. Then if you take a look at what I did, I've got ink in there. So I push this button, and that discharges and forces air out, and then it sucks it back in. But you have to be careful, because you could get ink on yourself. So let me get a paper towel for my sink over here. There we go. And I can keep this clean. So you can be pretty clean with it and not have to get it all over. But there's a refill. Okay, I think that's kind of cool to see. Again, I don't have any monetary engagement with Pilot. I think they're great fountain pens, but I don't know anybody from Pilot at all. Okay, so let me close up this ink. Make sure you put your ink lid super tight, otherwise an ink spill in the drawing you spend a lot of time with would be beyond frustrating. That would be, cuss word inducing. So I lived in New York long enough to know all the good cuss words. And I'm Italian, so I don't know what that means. Sorry, Italians out there, but New York Italians. We've got a good feel for that. Okay, let's go back to drawing. So there's your fill up, and now we can move to our cast shadows on our box that's being cast on the ground, that little tabletop. So I'm going to bring in this little edge of my 3-point box and then start to pull down. See how it gets a little reflective right in through here? That goes darker, so I can start to go darker in through here. It's much better when you have lots of ink in there. Much better. Works pretty well. Nothing like a good fountain pen. And you can write with it and do whatever you want. Okay, so darker in through here. I'm not going to go too much darker. I want to bury it. You always want to let, even your core shadows, what if we put a little ping pong ball, a white ping pong ball in front of that? Would you be able to see it? So you don't have to blast your dark, super dark all over. You don't want to keep them flat. All right, so moving on with this cast shadow back here, I'm going to glaze over it, which means I'm going to layer another pass. Notice I slightly changed my angle, so I'm slightly cross-hatching. I think what I don't like about cross-hatching proper is that if you go at 90 degrees, I'll come over here, it looks like this. I think that starts to look like a basket weave drawing. I see drawings like that. That's just my preference. Alright, so I'm going to come over here. This is a little bit longer than the image, but that's okay. They don't have to be perfect. And we'll take this cast shadow over here. We'll go a little bit darker. In through here, it's working pretty well now. We'll go a little bit darker in through here. There we go. Okay. And I'll kind of soften this edge up by going the opposite directions. This might still be a little light. Let's go one more pass. Add it here. There we go. It's feeling pretty good. Let me go a little darker now, over and through here, so we can start to see all those adjusting relationships. And remember, everything through here is for the most part very soft edge. It is a soft edge transition. Ink pen can be a little harsh, especially if you're going quicker. That's okay. We accept it as artists and viewers of art, connoisseurs, that's ink and that's a little harsher. And we admire the control of what you think can be a very demanding, hard to control material, and it can be. So I'm going to put like a little tone down here, and I'm going to lighten up some, put a little light across just for variation, but there won't be a whole lot of it. That's working pretty well. I think I'm feeling pretty good about where we're headed here. I can tweak this a little bit. I'll move on, soften this a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to start now with get into the cylinder here. And I think before I go into that, I'm going to go around it just a little bit further and put on a little bit more background form shadow in the ground here. Ground being the background, figure-ground relationships. If you haven't heard that before, figure-ground relationships means that the object is the figure, the ground is what sets it off, or you hear it called positive negative space. So figure-ground relationships or positive and negative space. There we go. Continuing on here. Got a nice scratchy noise to it. Catch that edge a little bit. Now I want to catch my cast shadow before I lose it, because I've already drawn it in. I want to catch it a little bit so we can kind of see it. It's about running through here. So I know it's darker, so the lines in between are a little bit smaller. And through here. Also sets up a nice contrast against that light of that cone. Through here. And through there. Catch that down a little bit further. It's working pretty well. Okay, then I'll catch the cast shadow on the table from the cylinder a little bit, but I don't want to get too far before I get that form shadow in. So just to give another pass right through there, and come down and catch that, and pull this over. There we go. All right, so I want to get that form shadow now of the cylinder. I'm going to put a little bit of this paper towel slightly earlier, right under here. I could put this, actually I'll just put this on top. That's what I'm supposed to do. Okay. Let's see here. Form shadow now on the cylinder. We'll take it out a little bit further. So we're going to go darker here. And lay that in. And then we're going to add core shadow. Here we go. Working pretty well. So I'm going to add that core shadow. Now that banded shadow, we get 2 for the price of 1 with core shadow. We get that darker pop, that turn, right? And we also get reflected light, which is great. So it's a nice bargain, which I love. Love core shadow. You get 2 for the price of 1, and you get the artistic popping out of the form. Also, remember this. Well, I'll do these techniques with the figure later when I get to them. Everything in time. I've still got 3-point perspective I've got to get through too as well. So these drawing solutions, these drawing concepts, which are time-honored and been practiced for centuries, work with a figure. Just as simple as you can think of it. So I'm going to add the core shadow now. So I'm going to stay out of the stroking part of reflected light a little bit so I can get where I make the darker area of the core shadow start to show up a little bit. The stroking pattern's about the same. It gets a little scratchy. Right in through here. Come around, soften it up by changing direction just a little bit. I'm gonna catch this bottom a little bit, running through here of my cylinder, running through there. Now I'm gonna go in a slightly more vertical way so I can hit the cast shadow. So what I said earlier about watch your verticals, this doesn't apply because I'm layering it, and so they won't be as strong. We don't see them as much, but I need a cross-hatched line to get that darker in through there. So I'm going to go in a more vertical stroking pattern to go darker, and then I can fade off into the reflected light. It's not as strong, and it unifies it a little bit. So I'm getting my reflected light, working it pretty good. There we go. Okay. Take a drink of my Diet Coke. Have a drink handy. Let you catch up a little bit. Alright, so we're coming through here. Bring down some middle form, lighter and darker form shadow through here. Working pretty well. Then catch it on the back side a little bit. Here. And a little bit here, catch that edge. And I'm going to go another pass of coarse shadow right in through. I need another pass, and I'm going to let this reflected light be show up a little bit more than the image. I like to have my reflected light show up a little bit more. Gives it that atmospheric quality. If you like comic book art or graphic novels, anime maybe, and some of you might like that, you might be really attracted to flat shadows where they eliminate completely the core shadow and the reflected light. They just have a flat shape. That gives you that really cool looking angularity, but it flattens things out. So just know that. So I'm going to catch my elliptical edge just a little bit, get a little bit stronger in through here. And I'm going to take on my cylinder edge, point out there, and then point out here a little bit. Catch this edge so I can clean that. And I'm going to have to make one more little pass with coarse shadow, but now I'm going to go in a more diagonal way because I need more cross-hatching action. And so about right in through here, and it's a very squiggly kind of stroking, isn't it? Just to get that over. You know, there are other ways to use pen and ink. There's a guy out there that uses pen and ink a lot. Alfonso Dunn, I think that's all he does. A lot of students that I get emails from like him. Go for it. Watch everybody. That's good. Be careful. If you want some tips, just let me know. I'll help you find some good things, but I'm not gonna endorse or dislike anybody really. Just tell you what I think is really working well. Most people are trying to be honest with what they know. Okay, so I'm gonna make a little bit darker here, right in through there, and tighten up this edge. I might go a little bit darker in the background over through here. Lots of slight cross hatching in through there. That's plenty, I think. Okay, not worried about that edge. It flies over, I can catch some light on there. So I think that's working pretty well. I might tighten this up here, catch this edge of my cast shadow, especially this is a little stronger and darker, and then darken that in just a little bit here. I might come around the opposite way. That's what I'll do, slight crosshatch. There, catch that edge, there we go. And then let me beefen up this value here on the back side, go a little bit, it's just slightly darker. I'm trying to keep it loose. Through here, this cast shadow back here can go a little bit darker. I don't want to make it pure dark. Be careful. Shadows have value ranges within them. They're not pure dark. If you need to study objects in three-dimensional reality, from images is fine too, but on its own it's not enough. You need to study from the live. That's why these videos are good instruction, but there's nothing that can replace working from the real thing too. Until you get it. Then you get it, you can do what you want. There we go. So a little bit darker, a little bit lighter in the middle. I think that works pretty well, and I'll take care of that in a little bit. We'll come back over here a little. So I want to work a little light on that cylinder so you can see it. And then we'll go from there. Okay, so I'll pick up the chalk, and we'll go to town a little bit. So it's a little bit lighter in through here. It's just a little touch of lights. It works pretty well. I can give it kind of a mark if I wanted to make it looser. If it was really big, you get really loose with this. You could come over here and say, you could get some nice cross-hatching marks of your own later on. That's why chalk is so nice, because you can get those marks without having to push down too hard. Okay, so let's go lighter over here. I come across the form a little bit. Sometimes I'll kind of test out what I like, and I'll take it back just a little bit, and then kind of come over. Okay, that's looking pretty well. Come down a little bit, keep this lighter. And then right in through here, I might point right through here. That light comes through. And through there. It's a nice feel to it. It pops over, gives us a nice contrast. I'm not going to put any highlight on the cylinder. I am going to come over, try to keep my head out of the way, and come over and catch this edge of the lip of the cylinder right in through here. Kind of be quick with it. Another nice stroke. Keeps it nice and tight. Maybe in the back just a little bit. And then right over through here, give it a little bit of pointing. Catch this light coming across here. See how I'm going to take that edge back from the ink I made on top of that. Take that edge a little bit. Come over, catch this point. And just not quite as light as this one. This is the light. This is about a highlight too as well. Kind of run through. And then just catch that edge a little bit. And I think that works pretty well. Right, so we've got that working. Moving a little bit, so we'll just keep on carrying on. And most of the work is done really with the ink pen and the paper. That's why tone paper is so nice. I put a little bit of light over through here. Not a whole lot. Back through. I could put a little light there. I don't think I want to put too much. I don't want it to pop out, so I'll leave it. This feels decently nice. And through here. Maybe turn this over. Just a little bit coming through, and I think we're good to there. Let's move on now to the cone, and then we'll get close to finishing it out. Okay, so I'm going to move this down a little bit over. You can see that. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on now to the cone here. I may take this cone edge, tighten it up a little bit right in through there. Take that over. We've got this cast shadow later on to deal with, kind of coming through, kind of gets softer in through there. So all this is going to go a little bit darker back here. But I'm not going to blast it dark. Take that to above that edge, keep that edge crisp and clean. There we go. Here by just taking that edge, and then I can kind of draw right to it. Keep it super clean. Best I can. And I'm just layering it over. Like so. And it starts to get darker, starts to pop out. And that was just through layering. I got that, and I could go maybe take another pass later on. Now I'm going to re-catch this cast shadow over here. It moves in this direction. I'm going to take this curve down, meets up about right in through here and over. Take that edge right in through there, catch that sharp edge and let it fade in through there. So let's go a little darker, take another pass at it. Normally I would block in everything and refine all my shadows first, but I think getting to a stage might keep you in a little bit more locked in maybe. It's harder doing it this way than blocking everything and refining everything in shadow first, but not impossible. That's how I teach at school. Try to be more rigorous. I didn't say rigid, but more rigorous with students, especially in their formative first 2 years. And you can really start to break these rules or explore different possibilities within the rules. So this is working pretty well. I'm gonna bring out a little dark over here just to compositionally bring us through, and I could crosshatch this direction to do that, just to kind of bring this two together. Some crosshatch lines in through there and then back again, and that brings kind of a slight dark resolution over here. Makes your eye come over just a little bit, and I think that's important just for compositional flow and movement. I could bring this over just a little bit. Okay, so lots of layering can happen throughout a drawing. There we go. All right, so we'll continue to pick up on this cone here. I think I'll point out the top tip a little bit, catch this line, point here and here. There we go. So let's work on these shadows. So we've got two different shadows. We've got two cast shadows running into here. We've got some from the block or the box, and we've got another one from the sphere, and it gets, when they overlap a little bit, and they get darkest right in here, which is really pretty interesting. So we've got that situation. Remember, this needs to be, this ending of all this needs to be a little sharper than this. Why? This is a form shadow. So form shadows have soft edges. Boundaries, right, have harder edges. Plane changes have harder edges, and also cast shadows. This is a cast shadow, so we have to be careful. So perceptually, it's very slight, but remember that this form shadow on that cone, I chose this image because of that, to talk about that. The form shadow on the cone has to be softer in its transitioning ending than the cast shadow on the cone. Just be careful. We have two different shadows on that cone at the same time. You'll see that on the figure model all the time. You've got to be able to distinguish, recognize the difference between the two, and render them differently. Otherwise, you confuse your audience. I think that's important. All right, so here we are, subtly coming down this form shadow of the cone and through here. And of course, we've got the cast shadow on the backside too as well. Point out a little bit there. Come out and over, and then it'll be a little bit darker. So we kind of work them in unison, and the overlapping shading lines can happen through there. Like in through here, it gets a little darker. Darkest closest to the object, especially in the side closest to the viewer, then it starts to fade out. And get a little softer in through there. I can soften that up. There we go. It seems to be working pretty well through there. Okay. All right. So let me get that edge tighter. And of course, if we had more, it would reach out to about right there. Okay. Core shadow now on this form shadow. Maybe let's actually make one more pass of value on the cone, a block in there, and now we'll go into form shadow. So core shadow. So core shadow will start up here, and it pretty much runs into the tip. It doesn't show a lot of reflected line. Then it starts to come out. So this is kind of a diagonal line I'm making slightly cross-hatched, and I'm just lightly keeping it varied. There's space in between the lines that I make. That's important. We talked about that earlier, the amount of space between the lines that you make. is so very important. The closer you get them together, the darker it gets pretty quickly. And notice we didn't color anything out where it looks something like, make sure I'm on camera, something like that. That's haven't done that much at all. That's going to give you a really flat, harsh dark really quickly. That's hard to control. So I'm keeping a lot of space between, feathering out my line. Means I'm feathering it out here a little bit, then coming back in and through a little bit. There we go. Letting more of the reflected light show. Then I can come back, make the opposite stroke like I'd done before to repeat that hatching, cross hatching, and go a little darker. Like I said, I like to have my reflected light show up a little bit more to keep it kind of a round, turned kind of form. So it's working pretty well. All right. So again, you notice we use about 95% pen, but then we can also use a little bit of the white pencil, about 10, maybe 15%, 20 max. Probably not even that much in our drawing. Okay, so coming across here, turning the form. And now we're starting to soften up the edge, and then we're turning it. So now I'm starting to hatch and turn, right? So we're going from coarse shadow to darker form to lighter form shadow pretty ridiculously quick. And so you just have to be sensitive to it. So I'm going to come across here, bring this over, and I can put some line on top of that later on, right through there. And come across and over here. I think we're getting pretty close to what I want on that part of it. I may get this a little tighter here. And go just a little bit darker into there. That works pretty well. So let's capture the cast shadow in through here. And I'm going to I always change my mind, don't I? Soften this up just a little bit further. It's got to be soft transition. It's got to be feathered, taper that, feather it, however you want to say it. Soft, soft, soft. So we can contrast it against a little bit harsher cast shadow. Now when cast shadows are off of a hard surface and onto a curved surface, or like a human surface, they get a little bit softer, but not so much that you don't want to contrast them between the two. Form shadow here and cast shadow coming up here. And you can have reflected light and cast shadows too as well, because the light moves into. Okay, so we'll come across another path here, another pass as well. Come through here. We'll keep on going. It's a little bit darker along the edge here. Yeah, and through here. There we go. And this shadow on the back over here, this cast shadow on the ground can go just a little bit darker against that edge. So we can have a little bit more contrast against that cast shadow where it gets reflected light right in through here. And also running through here we can go a little bit darker of the two. Now we'll make another pass here. Add it. We'll keep this a little bit sharper. I'll just kind of curve this over this line and kind of tighten up that edge. It is soft enough, but not as much as our form shadow on the other side. So we have to be careful. So I think that works pretty well. I think I'm going to soften this transition with one more line. And I think that's going to work for us. So now I'm going to, we're almost there. We're getting close to finishing this out on the paper. There we go. So I'll go a little darker in through here. And of course on the tabletop as well through there. All right, let's add a little light, and I think we're just about to be finished with it. So, okay, let's come over and take a look and see where we're at here. So we're coming up, and we're gonna start maybe up here, just a little bit of line. I'm gonna take my sharper one. Running through, I can get up in through there a little bit better. There we go, and I'll come down the side a little bit. There we go. A little bit lighter on the left side where the light is. Be careful to transition this. So I can take that off, I don't like it. Just run my finger over it really quickly. Take it down a little bit. And we'll run some light through. A little bit of enough light coming in through here, not a whole lot of darker than the paper, just a little bit. Coming down through. It's working pretty well. Then it gets a little hotter right in through here as it picks back up. Just a little bit. I think that's working pretty good with what we've got. Now I'm going to take the top and make just a little bit lighter. I can point this a little bit here, catch that, and then right at the tip, the very tip, kind of give it a glossing final cherry on top to the cone, just a little bit to say that's a tight edge coming up there on that. And then you can say, okay, hey, do I want a little light here or not? You could, I'm going to put just a little bit because I can. If I don't like it, I could just take it out with my finger or my eraser. But just a little bit to give it a variation. This might be just a little bit lighter. And then we can say, okay, just for a variation, maybe just, there's areas where it's subtly in light, subtly in dark. It's really about close to the tone of the paper and just a touch lighter. I'm not going to put any lighter areas beyond here. I might just give this a little bit of a glistening right through there, and then maybe just a touch of light coming across. Not by a whole lot more running through there. That can be plenty. Just enough. Okay, so I think we finished that out. I think we're pretty close there. I think I'm going to put a little bit of a lip here and just a touch more here just to draw the viewer in, make it a little tough edge. We don't necessarily see that on the image. I'm just going to add that. I'm going to add a little bit of light here. Later on you can take a lot of artistic license. And the basics will keep it pretty basic. That's the point of it, just to learn the basic mechanics of the craft. Okay, so there you go. We talked about ink pen, fountain pen on the light blue paper, and we started rendering our forms, our objects, a lay-in. You could use graphite pencil to lay in if you want. I wouldn't use charcoal or anything else, but I did mine in ink. I think that you can get used to that, and I think it'll be fine. So if you're going to lay in, you draw a real light line. Keep it very light, but if you kind of lack a little confidence, which is okay, you can use a graphite line. Of course, the graphite line disappears, but notice that I made some little extra lines and they've all disappeared. So they have a way of disappearing, which is pretty nice. So we blocked in, we refined, and then we started adding light from the middle tone of the paper to lighter to lightest, which are the highlights. And I think we're good to go there. So you might want to come along and say, hey, do I want to make that a little lighter if you wanted to, just a touch. And you can make maybe this edge A little lighter in through here, but not by much. Okay, I think we've got it. So there you go. All right, stay tuned for more lessons. We'll be back soon to continue on more drawing practice. All right, keep practicing, keep drawing. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.